And we're being live streamed now. And I think that the mayor is just connecting to audio, and then you should be good to go.
Okay, that sounds great. Welcome, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you kindly. Sorry I'm running a few minutes late. Good to see everybody.
Yep, so we have a quorum with you, me, and Councilmember Bowden. I hadn't heard one way or the other if Councilmember Saccharin or Councilmember Waring would be joining one way or the other or not.
I haven't either.
I think, yes, sir. They responded to Philip that they were available, but they just haven't joined yet.
Okay, well, I'll give them another minute or two, and then we can get rolling if that's okay with everybody.
Sure, absolutely. In the meantime, I heard you had a lot of rain, West Ashley.
Yes, it was day number 2 of being dreary and like sheets of rain.
Well, you know, it's funny. I was watching a report last night, and it was 0.4, not even a half inch downtown, and town center Mount Pleasant had 4 inches.
Yep.
And North Charleston had 3. And today downtown, I didn't feel like it was no more than another half inch of rain, but I heard that the bomb fell out West Ashley.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like some roads had puddles on them and shadow moss.
Is that
So,
right?
Not so surprising, but
Do you know how many inches you got out there? I used to count the inches whenever.
no, I've been meaning to look at like Charleston weather or something on Twitter and see if he measured it because he lives out there. But no, I haven't seen the official totals. But I know this morning we had a serious thunderstorm out there. Dog freaked out, woke up the baby. It was a fun way to wake up at 4 a.m.
Wow. All right, now that we got the weather covered.
Yeah.
So do we have anything on the agenda than talking about how ordinances come to us?
So we have the invocation, the ordinance proposal process, any other proposed updates to the rules of order, and then adjournment. So I'm hoping that we can preserve everybody's time and have a lively discussion on the ordinance proposal process, and then be able to any other sections we want to take a look at. We can have another meeting, and then hopefully we can bring something to council either at the August meeting or in September.
All right.
I'm going to go ahead. It's 5:07, so I'm going to go ahead and get rolling.
Okay.
So we'll call this meeting of the Ad Hoc Rules Advisory Committee meeting to order at 5:07, and I'd like to start with a moment of silence if that's okay with everybody.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So the next item on the agenda is the ordinance proposal process, and just for the sake of everyone on the call, you'll remember this committee was authorized by council to take a look at the proposal process, because as I jokingly say, if you've ever seen Schoolhouse Rock, with how a bill becomes a law, it's they kind of break it down for everybody. But if you asked, how does an ordinance get proposed, or how does an ordinance become law in the city of Charleston? I think a lot of people would have trouble describing what that process is. And the great thing about laws is that we write them down. So here we are. We'd like to get something codified on the proposal process. And I'm imagining that with the great minds here, we can come up with a couple of different alternatives to how an ordinance should be proposed, because there's obviously going to be a time where there's exigent circumstances, something needs to make an agenda. That's obviously one way. But in terms of a formal process, we can have our discussion around that, about how would a council member bring an ordinance to council. Because I think part of this is also, we want to make sure that the staff has adequate time to research, to prepare, to look at best practices, so that we can craft good laws that we don't have to go back and amend because no one knew what the process was. No one gave staff the time to vet things and help put it together. So that's just kind of the laying the framework here. So, and I can let, Councilmember Bowden, you have kind of the fresh eyes approach to this being newer on council. So I'd love to get your thoughts. And then obviously we have legal in the clerk's office here with us as well, who are integral to, helping the well-oiled machine keep going.
Thank you. And that was a helpful overview, I think. Like I said, when we first discussed this as a council communication, my big concern is making sure that, we're not kind of forcing big changes without a more deliberate process. And so, still as I think about this, the cleanest way in my brain to do it is either one to bring it as a council communication where we can have sort of some conversation around the table about what everybody thinks is best. Looks like Councilmember Waring is joining.
Oh, good.
So I might just wait for a second until he pops up.
Welcome, Councilmember Waring.
Hello, Mr. Chairman.
Good to see you again.
Good.
All right, so Councilmember Waring, I was just saying, I think there's sort of two ways to address this issue of how ordinances come to council.
Right.
And one would be, come up as a council communication. We can all sort of weigh in on the idea, potential problems anybody sees with it immediately, and then it can be workshopped through staff if it seems like that's the right way to go, and then go through the committee for further consideration before making its way back to council. Or it can go through the committees, and the committees can take whatever time they want on it, and consider it, maybe send it back to staff to think about a little bit more, or send it on to council if they think it's appropriate. But then we just have 1 week where it is solely coming to us, so that we can know that it's coming the following week to take a vote on. I just hate personally taking votes on things that I feel need work, or this whole process of having a hour and a half long conversation just to defer something anyway.
Listen, I think you're right in that on those complicated issues, in particular, where it has to go, in particular, multiple times back and forth to legal. The committee has the full discussion, but when it comes to council, I don't know, almost half of council didn't have the benefit of that. So that's why I suggested, after you brought that up, when a zoning happens at the planning commission and a rezoning happens and comes forward to council, it doesn't come to next meeting. I think that the problem is it comes to council too fast, and the remainder of council didn't have a chance to review it. So in the case of a rezoning, it takes 30 days before it can come to council on our agenda, which I think would give ample time for, hopefully, information to be disseminated to the remainder of council who doesn't serve on the particular committee, to kind of vet it out before, as you said, and you're right, having an hour and a half discussion on the floor about one issue that doesn't make sense. And its primary reason was because half of council, didn't participate in the extensive committee discussions.
And I think that's right, because there haven't been too many instances, but it could, where, especially if a committee is meeting on the same day that council meets, something could get brought up where their discussion only happened a few hours beforehand, and sometimes right before, and then it's coming immediately to council, and there's not a cool off period, so to speak, to work on it, to digest it, and that type of thing. And so we were just kind of kicking around that before you had jumped on. there's probably going to be a few ways, and I think Councilmember Bowden's right on that. If we come up with 2 or 3 ways that ordinances make it to the agenda, and I think that's really the important part, like the ordinance making it to the agenda, because there are times where there's an exigent circumstance and the mayor in the agenda making authority that he has needs to place something immediately on the agenda without it going through the regular committee process. So I think we can codify that and kind of preserve that. But then I think to Councilmember Bowden's point, to iron out, if we're, the standard kind of thing, right? Like I'm working on the light pollution stuff. So I brought it up as a communication item. So then turn around and, start looking at best practices and that type of thing before we'll place it on public, have you place it on Public Works and Utilities. And that'll probably be, I think, to Councilmember Bowden's point, like we'll go with a discussion first. Then if the committee wants to move forward, then staff can begin working on an ordinance. And then that would come back to Public Works and Utilities to be looked at and amended if needed. Then it would go to council. I
think that portion would get some pushback because you got a lot of council members that believe in the committee process. So it's almost like you're doing almost twice. You instead of going to, if you think it's a public works issue, then I think you would, instead of putting it on the agenda, I think you'd bring it to public works, do the vetting there, have the discussions there, and eventually to the city council agenda. Because putting it on as communications, you have that discussion taking time on council, and eventually it's going to come to public works, and eventually the legal, and then guess what? Back to council. So I think you just bring it to the committee, you save some time.
Okay.
I mean, you'll be given a platform. I mean, in this case, you just brought up public works, but it could be real estate. It could be community development. It could be something like that. But I think you'd save your time as well as others if we just brought it straight to it. Decipher which committee it should be funneled through and take it there first.
What about, so just trying to think through all of that. So what about if you're bringing up something where a committee may not have, or there may not be a relevant committee for that, we don't necessarily want to always form an ad hoc committee if we're just trying to tackle a single thing.
I agree. In that case, then I would agree. Then you put it on the agenda, but it's going to be a kind of real situation where it doesn't fit in one of these committees. Man, it's going to be a real $3 bill for it not to. I mean, community development is so broad, and obviously if it's dealing with property, it speaks to real estate,
So if we were going to bring it, if it was going to originate in committees and then bubble up, would we want to kind of standardize, I guess, the agenda process then to have something that is like a communication topic or the, discussion, council member discussion topic at a committee meeting?
I mean, most committees has involved discussions anyway, but they're always going to be, if there's something that truly doesn't fit into one of the responsibilities of the standing committees, then yeah, you put it on the agenda and show through that process, one of those legal minds will tell us where we should go with it,
So I think I hear you saying there's kind of like we talked about. So there's the 2 pathways would be, if there is a committee of first incidents, then we work it on as a discussion item and move the ordinance process forward from there. But if there's not a committee of first incidents, then it would go on. We want to say that it would be listed as the council communication item.
That's what I would think anyway. Yeah. For example, use your lighting issue, and if there's public works, it's going to be put on the public works agenda as requested by Councilman Brady. And when I get to that item, I'm gonna call on Councilman Brady to let us know, the issues. And legal is already going to be on that meeting, so they'll hear the discussion just like us. And eventually, it gets to action step, which will be brought back to the committee, and then eventually the council.
Mr. Chairman, could I?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Take a shot at just giving my own interpretation of how it works, and then and see if this kind of fits in. I think it does with what y'all were saying. And I think if we go by what, quote, normal practice should be, we're not that far off from where we need to be. It's just never been codified. It's never been stated this is the way it works.
I agree.
And number two, there've been a few exceptions or a couple of things that kind of slipped through the cracks, you know, and so here we are. So it seems to me there's three ways to get an ordinance going to us, and one is by my authority and through the administration to bring forward a proposed ordinance to council. And at this point, I feel that we are very attentive to bringing it to the appropriate committee, you know, to get to council. If there's a case where there's just not really an appropriate committee, we would bring it to first reading on council agenda. So that's one way, so to speak, coming from the administration. The second way, as I view it right now, is through a committee, either from the committee itself or a request of a council member to the committee, at which point a discussion would occur of the need for an ordinance for whatever. And if the committee concurs, yes, that's a good idea, we ought to investigate that, then the committee can instruct staff to work on it, to do the research and bring a proposed ordinance back to that committee, just on the request of the committee. And thirdly, at city council meeting, through our council member communications, the same thing can occur if it's a council member wants to bring it to the whole council, or it doesn't apply to some particular committee. Hey, I've got an idea. I think we need an ordinance on so-and-so. And if we have the consensus at council, then we direct staff to legal to do the research and best practices, as you said. So we bring back to council. I think if it is appropriate to go through a committee, you know, to go to the committee first and then to council. So that's correct me if I'm wrong, but those seem to be the three pathways to get there. But like I said, we've never really written it down as part of our rules or whatever.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Mayor, I agree with all of that, but the one that created the issue was an ad hoc committee, when you really think about it. So it was the racial reconciliation, you know, whatever committee. Yeah. And when that reported up and eventually came to council and in short order, it's not the process that you made mention. You're right, it may not be codified, but I think I agree with you 100% on that. But when we have an ad hoc committee, usually it's because it doesn't fit in one of those standing committees. And then I think that's what precipitated it coming forward. I don't know, maybe on the one that created the issue. And I think it is a justifiable issue, Councilman Biden. That did not fit in the three buckets that I think we all agree with. Mayor, from committee, and then actually something can bubble up from council, on the floor of council. I agree with all three of those in the way that we're doing it now. I think it's fine.
So that's a good point. We have committees that aren't council committees, like you mentioned the racial conciliation, but on a regular basis, our sustainability committee, our health and wellness committee, these aren't council member committees. We might have representatives on, but often they will bring a recommended ordinance to council. Does that need an extra layer? Is that what y'all are thinking?
I would agree. I would agree. Yeah, like it. So I'll give you an example. Like the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission, whenever they come up with something that they would like council action on, they'll present a report to the Committee on Traffic and Transportation as a council committee to then take action to decide if it's something that we should move to full council, right? And so I think that's the check. Like having it come through a committee of first incidence is kind of the check in the process.
But use the mayor's example. I think that's a good one you brought up, Councilman Brady. But take the health and wellness. I don't know. Let's say that leads to an ordinance. I mean, bikes, okay, it seems kind of natural to go to traffic transportation. But where would health? Where would the health?
I would probably refer that to the Committee on Human Resources.
Yeah,
Like it would have the most natural.
You're right. You're right. Good point. Good point. Good point. Good catch.
Yeah, but there will be cases where, I don't know,
What?
sustainability on gas mower blowers or something. Like
Yeah.
some kind of ordinance, about converting to electric blowers. I mean, I think there's.
You're right. Remember the noise? Remember the thing with the drills and working on Saturdays or something? Remember that one?
I mean,
Yeah.
I think some cases it's just going to go to first reading on council, and if y'all want to, if council's comfortable enough, we'll give it first reading. If not, we'll.
But I think the issue was, even if it comes to council, I mean, we get our packet on a third. Well, I usually get mine on Thursday. And then here we are Tuesday talking about it. Whereas whatever group that brought it certainly had more than 4 or 5 days to discuss it. And to Councilmember Bowden's point is that you just like to have the information longer to review than less than a week before we have to vote on it.
Keith, I think one of the ways you can handle that is if, say, the Sustainability Commission or the Racial Reconciliation Commission came up with an ordinance, it'd be presented during council communications, and it would be carried over until the following council meeting for first reading. So you'd have the 2 weeks to review that before it would come up for first reading. That's one way you.
Oh, great point. So it'd be presented as information, okay? And then to be voted on in third. That's. What do you think about that, Ms. Copeland? That sounds like something we should commit to writing. Provide as information, and then we're going to vote on this, 30 days. That makes sense. Kind of like the planning commission.
I was trying to wrap my head around this idea that how to get the information to you sooner. And I was trying to think maybe we could have staff when they provide the packages to the planning commission, they provide it to you as well. Would that be a fix, or would that be just more stuff sent in your inbox, that you'd have to read? I don't know if that would help.
I think it's most stuff because it hadn't passed.
What I was more thinking of is when we had this discussion about the I'm going to call it the HUD ordinance. We got to the meeting and it turned out they had a 3-hour long community development meeting where they talked in depth about this. I had no idea about that until Tuesday. I mean, maybe there's some argument that I should be watching every committee meeting, but I think the reality is that it would just be helpful if I knew that existed, and then I could go and watch it in my own time, and then come prepared to the following meeting to vote. And that's just going to take more than a couple days, and
Right.
Multiply that if it's the real estate committee that meets immediately before council. There's just no time to do that, and that's happening while people are traveling from wherever they are to the council meeting.
Well, so to that point, so what Rick is suggesting that is, let's back up and let's talk about the HUD situation. Say community development has that meeting. I don't even know, was it the day of or the day before the council meeting?
It was on a Thursday. It was on a Thursday, and council meeting was that
Tuesday. So was your suggestion that item would be for information purposes only at the following council meeting, and then the next council meeting, it would be an action item? See, I like that. I missed it.
Yeah, I agree.
Right.
Good way for you to vet it and
If
without action required.
If it comes from a standing committee, it can just be part of their regular report, and just let everybody know that, hey, we had a really great conversation about this. I would encourage everybody to go check that out, or talk to somebody on the committee who was part of that, and then we can know what that conversation was, and be able to respond if we want to, or add to something at the following meeting when we do first reading. And then it can come for second meeting, the following meeting, and we've got
So
pretty well worked out.
is it worse than to think about the it from a non-standing committee, is it worth mapping out, similar to how we just kind of talked about, like health and wellness could, send it through human resources. Is it worth kind of mapping out where the outliers are, like where there's not kind of the flow up, so to speak, from an advisory committee or advisory commission, so that way we can know, hey, this committee is kind of over here. There's not really a committee that it would flow through. So if it's coming from them, this is the process, and it's coming from these other ones, it would flow through a committee.
I mean, I guess we just need to differentiate, just going back to Rick's suggestion. There are certain action items that are coming through committees that are coming from staff on like MOUs and things that need to get done.
Right.
Timing purposes. And then you've got council member directed items like big ordinances and things like that, then emergency ordinances. I guess we just had to figure out how to differentiate how each one falls into each category and then what happens after it falls into that category. Like you're saying, I just don't know how we would differentiate right now one from the other. Well, I mean, there are certain obvious examples, but I just want to make sure that we don't have council members thinking that we're picking on them and their particular items in a certain way.
Yeah, I hear you on that.
Yeah, and there are gonna be commissions, like for instance, the tourism commission.
Mhm.
I don't know what standing committee that would fall under. So if they come up with an ordinance recommendation having to do with anything, I think in order to give council members the opportunity to review it, it probably should come up as an information only at a council meeting, and then be prepared at a subsequent council meeting for first reading. So to give the council members at least 2 weeks to think about it and review it and talk to people about it. Does that make any sense?
And I like that a lot, Rick. I think
I think
makes
that makes sense, Rick, because I just remember sustainability, for example, I just don't think the ordinance fit that clean a box that they always go to one committee. They've been about different things, they can be about different things. And I think it's okay to go to council for first reading when that happens. But like you say, do it for information first time up and give us till the next meeting before we take action on it. That sounds reasonable.
I think that's great. I think that's good. Let me tell you that, go back to the HUD ordinance. I was in the 3-hour committee meeting and it was like making sausage in that committee meeting.
Yeah.
So I think it should have come forward, but it came forward. So I know Councilman Bowden, you and Councilman Brady had seen that stuff for the first time, and others who saw it for the first time. It was unfair, to have to vote on that thing. So eventually had a long discussion, and what did we do? We deferred it.
Yeah.
So this suggestion works.
But let me say that there will be occasions where we have an ordinance that's a very simple, it's a no-brainer, it's going to pass unanimous.
Mhm.
It might not be an emergency, but I think I would like for us to have the ability, just like we can change an agenda, to say, hey, if we get a 3/4 approval just to go ahead and vote on this one,
Right.
almost like changing the agenda, that we have the ability to do that if it's just a really cut and dried, no controversy kind of thing. Is that?
I agree.
Yeah. I think that could be handled in the 3 kind of prongs that you had outlined. Like, I mean, that's just in your authority to set the agenda. Like, that's how that ordinance would come about, right? But then I'm like, the MOUs usually, don't those go through, they originate at Ways and Means.
Most of them do, yes.
Yeah, so that's, that's a bubble up that is just kind of, that's the process we all know the most. we're all on that committee. So I think, Mr. Mayor, to your point, just placing something on the agenda, you have that ability, and obviously we write laws down, so we will write that down. And I think those 3 kind of approaches work. And I do like Rick's, your compromise kind of idea of, instead of it always flowing through a standing committee, putting it on as just a discussion item in order for to get kind of the original kind of will of council sense. Because that's also one of the things I think when I think about staff working on things is that, you know, we want to move things as council members, we want to be able to move things forward that have at least a majority sentiment that this should even be explored so that staff is able to take the direction and manage their time effectively, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
I agree with that.
Yeah, me too.
Jennifer, are you hearing anything here of concern to you, or you got any comments you want to add?
No, sir, I'm good.
Okay. Thank you.
I do think we should exempt Ways and Means from any sort of like cooling off period, because all those things are, you know, need to be acted on quickly.
Mhm.
So that's I think one easy way to take care of a lot of the concerns. But I mean, it could also be that like a chair of a standing committee can designate something as moving forward faster, and I think they would know when to properly do that. I think we can trust everybody as chairman of a committee to handle that.
Like that.
Yeah, and so I think, Julia, on the exempting Ways and Means, I think we could put, just because it is a committee of the whole,
Mhm.
so to add it in that, you know, anything consisting of a committee of the whole is exempted, because there may come a time where there is another committee that we're all sitting on
Yeah,
instead of just naming Ways and Means.
makes
Just
sense.
trying to forward think that one.
Good idea. There's always something.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
I think we
Now-
settled that.
A lot of good ideas.
Is that clear as mud, Julia? On
I can't wait to start typing out these bullet points.
So
Yes.
would we bring this, Julia and Jennifer, in the form of an amendment to our rules? Or do we need to make an ordinance about all this ordinance making?
Jennifer, what are your thoughts on that? Because I'm looking at 2-24 right now and thinking we could insert it in there, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
I think we would have to bring it back to council as a revision to the code, as an ordinance amendment. So we probably need to come back to this committee for the committee to review and approve it. And then it would need to proceed to council.
I'm good with that.
Okay, I was just checking.
It would be great to eventually generate a flow chart from all of this, though, because there is a very large amount of confusion as to how an ordinance gets created and brought to the whole. So it
Well,
That's why we're here.
would be helpful for everyone, including staff.
If you create a flow chart, Ms. Copeland, we're gonna have to send that to traffic and transportation.
Put some stop signs and bumps and speed bumps and all that kind of stuff.
I'm happy to add those things if it helps.
I couldn't resist that one.
We do like our flow charts in TNT.
Yeah, well, and I also think it'll help, you know, next year being an election year as well. If there's any turnover on council, like having the process actually existing in the ordinance, it's something we can train the council members on when we do new council member orientation, when everybody's getting, you know, anybody new's getting onboarded. And then that way it's the standard. Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking of the way they go through with state lawmakers, like, you know, they learn how to submit a bill, they learn where it goes, and the committees that it gets directed to and everything. And so, yeah, I think this will greatly help as we kind of both do it retroactively and moving forward.
I think my biggest confusion right now, just from this discussion, is just the idea that like rezonings that are coming from planning staff that go through the planning commission, how are they going to be treated when they get to council for first reading? Are we going to put them in the same basket as everything else we've talked about here?
You mean a normal rezoning?
Just the rezonings that planning commission considers, and then it comes up in front of council.
Well, I mean, it already waits 30 days before it comes to us.
Okay, I just didn't know if you wanted more time, but I guess in that situation, you always, you defer, so that's.
Yeah, I
I
think
wanna
that's
make sure.
okay.
I just want to make sure I wasn't missing anything.
Yeah, that process seems fine to me as well.
Okay.
Most of them do the public hearing, but are there some that have the public hearing and some that don't?
They all have to have anything that's coming from the planning commission and going to council has to have has any amendment to the zoning ordinance that's been considered by the planning commission has to have a public hearing. So
Right.
we have to send an ad in to the paper, and it has to run, and we have to give the public notice 2 weeks ahead of the meeting.
That doesn't seem broken. That seems to work okay to me. I don't know about y'all.
Okay,
Yeah,
Yeah.
good. Just making sure. All right. Well, I feel like I have enough from you all to start a framework to send out. Absolutely.
Great.
Okay. And we'll, and Jennifer, if you wouldn't mind, or let me ask this. Julia, how much time do you need to put it together in terms of us scheduling the next rules committee meeting to be able to go over that?
Give me 2 weeks if you don't mind.
Okay. So towards the end of July?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
Come on.
And then Jennifer, does that give your staff enough time to herd the cats?
It should. I mean, I think we would probably be shooting for a meeting in August. I think it's what it sounds like. And then I guess it would go to the city council meeting in August. Is that sort of what y'all are planning?
I think that could work, because then it would make sense that in September we're moving back to 2 meetings a month, and the new rules would be in effect starting with the more frequent council meetings. Does that make sense?
Correct.
Are there
Yeah, I
any
think that sounds
other
good.
rules that you want to address while we have the benefit of this committee? Anything else?
That's where I was just getting ready to go now that we have finished discussion on item 2 on the
Oh,
agenda.
sorry. Sorry about that.
Thanks for the softball. Yeah, so to Julia's point, the third agenda item was on any other rules that, or new ones, anything that we see not working that we want to address, anything like that, as part of the rules of council that we're codifying.
I've got 2.
Okay.
I think the first rule is that I think we should consider anyway, is when the standing committees for council, council members have no input on this. This is one briefly, I think a couple of years ago, Mr. Mayor, you and I discussed. The mayor appoints and we accept every standing committee, other standing committee virtually in the city. We actually, the mayor recommends and we vote. In some cases, we actually recommend as well. So planning commission, board of zoning appeals, DAR, 1, 2, all of that. But when it comes to our committees, we have no say. So I think it should be the mayor recommends, we discuss, and then we vote on it. I'll recommend, for example, Mr. Mayor, on the History Commission, that was just not my area. And I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to get some racial balance and all of that. It's just not my forte, So,
I apologize.
no problem. You didn't know that. I didn't have a chance to share that with you. So I think that's one that we need to consider a rule change on. And then the second one is the conflict of interest. You and I, Mr. Mayor, get crossed on the floor on that. And my opinion of that is certainly different from yours. And I think if we were to look at the rule from the standpoint of conflict of interest or the appearance of the conflict of interest, I think some of the discussions we've had on the floor of council we wouldn't even have. And, when some members have a conflict, for example, you don't discuss the issue at all. In some cases, you leave the room. And you see some of the attorneys in the room sometimes do that. I've seen Peter do that. I've certainly done it on occasion with conflict of interest. Mm-hmm. So we have a different perception on that. When I say we, I mean members of council, the 13 members of council. And I think we need to come up with a way of handling that has a little bit more uniform approach to that. So you all did not know I was going to bring that up, and I started to forward it. So we don't have to. We can have a second meeting. We can have that on the agenda to discuss at another meeting. I don't want to have another HUD meeting. Where.
I will not allow a 3-hour rules discussion.
I don't want to do that. So, but I think those two items would be ones that I think we should.
Is that something, Julia, like the conflict of interest is an interesting one. Is that something we can get like the guidance of the municipal association on for, what the other large municipalities do with that?
Absolutely. And we can look at other municipalities and see how they have that stated in the ordinance and what's required. I mean, we can certainly have that information for you at the next meeting.
That would be great. And then to Councilmember Waring's first item on the recommendations, I mean, we do vote on the committee appointments, right? Like
really.
The first organizing meeting.
We vote on the mayor pro tem.
Oh, right.
We don't vote on the committee appointment. So.
Section 2-49 reads standing committees, appointment by the mayor. The mayor at the first meeting of each year during his or her term shall appoint standing committees and shall name the chairperson of each. And in case of a vacancy in any committee or in the chairpersonship of any committee from any cause during his or her term of office, he or she shall fill such vacancy. The mayor may, from time to time, make such changes in said committees as may be necessary or conducive to the convenience of the members. That's what it says.
I understand, and I'm proposing a change to that because I think council should have some input on where they serve on these standing committees. Right. It's really not that much different than the zone planning commission or the bar, for that matter. Matter of fact, the bar probably has more power. When on the BAR, even if we disagree with the ruling of the BAR, we got to take them to court. The public has to take them to court. On the standing committee we elected collectively from the same public that the mayor is, and we have no say. So it seems like an imbalance there, that's all.
So I'll give you an example. So like I serve on the alumni council for Wake Forest, and at the start of every academic year, we get an email from the alumni office that says like, essentially, here's all the subcommittees, rank your choices. Mm-hmm. So you're imagining something where we would there would be a formalized process for expressing where you would like to serve, and then the mayor kind of balances that and then recommends it.
Yeah. Well, I think actually, in particular, in the case of an election, after an election, I think there should be some discussion, in particular with the incoming people, to have with the mayor before the January meeting where committees are recommended by the mayor to council. I guess sometimes that happens. Sometimes it doesn't. People get the list and then they say, well, why am I on this committee or why am I on that committee? And probably because of communication. And it's not your fault, Mr. Mayor. I think communication goes both ways. It should be, well, a new person coming on doesn't even know about these committees in most cases. Take the example, Councilman Gregg or Parker, they kind of saw the list and let me know what hallway and classroom to go in, kind of like that, So
there's a visual.
I don't know when these rules were established, way before my time.
It was, yeah.
And I certainly have tried to make a good faith effort whenever a new council member comes along to ask them about their preferences,
okay.
And where they would like to serve, and I try to accommodate that wherever possible. It gets a little bit of a juggling act, I'll be honest with you, because even within council, I like to have some representation in some cases racially and geographically, and just kind of think about representation. But also you get a situation where, you get a popular committee like real estate or public works, and you'll have 8, or if you did the list, you'd have 9 people sign up. Oh, I want to be on that committee, and there are not enough seats to go around. So, you're never going to be able to give everybody exactly their preference, even if we do as you say and have council to approve my recommendations on.
Mr. Mayor, I agree with everything you said. You have been fair about that. What I'm saying is that you would still recommend, in other words, that vetting process, and you're right, something popular like real estate, you might have 9 people want to be on the real estate committee. So I don't think you're going to see a tsunami or a tidal wave. It change. I mean, you may have one who, well, I'm on the, I don't know which, I'm on the Human Resources Committee. I got to tell you right now, it's my first time on there, and we've only had one meeting since January. And I got to tell you, that's a pretty important committee right now. And for some reason, I've asked about it before, and apparently they don't, in the past, they hadn't met with a high degree of regularity. And as we approach this next budget, trying to pay our people, we got to come up with 17. Last figure I saw was 17 million someplace to get everybody paid appropriately. And we all know the trouble we had balanced the budget the last 2 years. Now, granted, funding is up, but it's up in the tourism and hospitality area, which means that's not going to, I think we had 7 ditch digging crews, and I think we got 3 of them staffed right now. And somehow that job classification for a ditch digging compensation is just too low. You can't hire people at $13.50 an hour for that. But somehow the person that's riding a lawnmower is classified the same as the person that's down in the ditch ducking water moccasins and hacking little mini trees coming up in these ditches. They get paid the same. I think if you're going down in that ditch, keeping these ditches open, I think that job should be paid more than somebody riding a riding lawnmower. The guy on the riding lawnmower feels bad about it, then he can come and get off the lawnmower and then take that job down in the ditch. But our human resources person says if we change that, we got to change all the job classifications above. And I don't think that has to be done that way. I think you reclassify the position that was, in my example, a ditch digging piece. And you know what we have in the trouble in sanitation. Some of those job classifications, if I drive a truck and we pay $22 an hour, right now we can't really hire people doing 22. The private sector is killing us out there. So we've got budgeted positions that are going unfilled, and at the end of the year, that money comes back into the general fund, and we can process all over again. We've got to reclassify some of these jobs so the monies that we got budgeted can go towards a higher rate of pay for that particular position. The day and time to paying somebody $3.50 an hour to do that hard labor. Years ago, decades ago, you could find people to do it. You just can't find them now to do it. So I think it's the structure that we're in. And I know one thing: we're not going to get there if we don't meet. Okay. So and somehow department heads knows where the Achilles tendon is, and they're frustrated that it can't be done. So I think the second thing I brought up with you, Mr. Mayor, sometime a couple of years ago, and we never got to discussion. It wasn't your fault. I wanted to know how many employees we have 65 and over. Okay. Information came back, oh, that's a HIPAA violation. It is not a violation of HIPAA to know the census on a group. I handle group insurance for Blue Cross and Blue Shield for almost 30 years. So that's the only way you can price a group, to know the age category. Okay. And the reason I'm saying that for you younger guys on here, we have the advantage. The mayor and I are virtually the same age, born in the same month, September. We have a choice of whether we want to get on Medicare or not. Hypothetically, if we were to go on Medicare, it would save the city a bunch of money. Now it's going to cost us a few more bucks. But it seems to me a supplemental policy would be a lot more, if that was an option, not a mandatory, if that was an option for myself to take, instead of the city paying, $1,000 or $1,200 a month for me. And my supplement was, I don't know, $500 a month. And I chose the $500 a month. And I'm paying whatever I pay now. You subtract that from the 500, city pays the difference. But that wouldn't be mandatory. Let's say it's a choice. I don't know. That would save the city, just on me, roughly $800 a month. I don't know how many employees out there are in that category, but we need to find out. Not only that, it takes my claims experience, Councilman Brady and Bowden. As an old guy, it takes as we get older, we have more health problems. In most cases, most people.
Same age, don't forget.
I know, that's what I'm saying. I'm giving these young guys, Brady and Bowden, a break here. It's open. But it takes that claims experience out of the city's cost structure, and it makes our group younger. And if the group is younger, guess what? The premiums are lower. And we spending what, $25 million a year or so on medical insurance for this. So I'm not saying reduce the benefits for the younger people. What I'm saying is there a way we can cover some of the older people more cost effectively, give them a choice, and then the city will save a lot of money on group medical.
We're taking the scenic route, Councilmember Waring, but do you want to tie that back into your the point you were originally making?
Well, again, I do think council members should have some input on where they're serving. So, and I again, Mr. Mayor, I don't think it's going to create a tsunami among council members. You're going to recommend, like you've done in the past, and I think there may be a little tweaking, but I don't think it'll be any great shift in service. Let's put it like that. So anyway, that's why I put it out there. And again, you all didn't know that was coming up. If we can have a follow-up meeting, you all can think about it, roll it through your mind, discuss it, kick it around.
Yep, because we can certainly add those to the agenda for the follow-up meeting that we can have in August. The one thing I did want to add that I thought for the rules was, and again, we can just discuss it at the next meeting, but we're operating under the ad hoc budget committee kind of process now, but it would seem to me, especially with the way the budgets have been going, that we should make budget a standing committee or a special committee of council, where we would name the chairman of the audit committee serves on the budget committee, and like that type of thing, where we actually kind of formalize it instead of it being an ad hoc. Because I think that having a committee that can meet fairly regularly, especially like with issues that you bring up, Councilmember Waring, like if HR discusses something like that, that can then go to the budget committee, which would be formed and be a regular standing committee that can meet as needed. And so I think that's worth, in my opinion, and you guys can feel free to not endorse that idea. But I think that's something that would make sense given the deliberations that we always have on the budget anyway.
So the audit committee is predetermined to be the audit chair, the public safety chair, the HR chair, the Ways and Means chair, and the Public Works chair, along with the mayor.
So is there a way to move it away from ad hoc status and just make it a regular committee?
Well, it was, we didn't have this committee when I got elected.
Right.
That it really helped communications amongst
I agree.
committees and the council members to have it. And I believe all council members are invited to attend each time. And it's an advisory committee to the mayor is the way it was set up.
Correct.
So, if you were going to do what you just described, you might as well just say we're going to have the Ways and Means Committee meet and deliberate on the budget all year long, and it be the council committee of the whole. But I personally, I think it's working okay the way it is.
Okay.
Yeah, listen, I think it worked great. I mean, we have some hard decisions to make,
So
but I think it worked great.
Councilmember Waring could tell you, the way it worked before we had a budget ad hoc committee was, and I remember this back to when I used to just follow city council, you know, Mayor Riley would deliver this big budget stack of papers literally on that last day that it was due before council, and everybody to a one would always complain, I hadn't had a chance to
Yes,
look at this thing yet. Isn't that right?
you're right. It was the transparency we have today is, you know, miles and miles ahead of what it was before. And even when you had something to discuss, actually, in my case, I would make an appointment going and see me around about the budget items, and other council members would too. So a lot of the vetting, instead of being done in an open ad hoc committee like we have now, was actually done 2 or 3 at a time, or one on one,
Right.
Raleigh in his office. But the problem with that, as I see it, the reason this one is so much better, Carl, you may have a question about an item that I never thought of. But as a result of you asking that question, we all had the benefit of the answer. So,
Yeah.
which I think increases the learning curve for everybody who participates on the ad hoc committee. So,
Councilmember Bowden, do you have anything else you want considered at the next meeting?
No, my primary concern was just the ordinance process. So I think that's you know, being addressed. I have heard other folks question whether there should be more meetings during the summer. I don't necessarily think so, but I think we've got our answer there.
We've been there before.
Listen, man, I'm glad COVID is subsiding, man. I don't know what, one year I think we had like what, 60 meetings or something like that. Come on, man.
In 2020, the full council met 53 times.
Is that woo?
Mm.
Wow.
Yeah, well, that includes all the emergency meetings.
Huh?
Now, who's counting when you're having fun?
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank the mayor and Councilman Brady and Bowden and all for bringing this together. The reason I'm saying I think it's an attempt to try to speed along our council meetings. You know, when we have all that discussion on the floor, it's something that's new to half a council, or you know, good many of council members. It makes sense. There's going to be a lot of discussion versus getting some of that information in advance, reviewing it, and then hopefully coming to an actionable vote sooner rather than later.
The other thing I wanted to bring up, because in other deliberative bodies I've been a part of, there's a consent agenda that usually is the like non-controversial stuff, meeting minutes, generally speaking, appointments to commissions and that type of thing, that you just take the one vote on the consent agenda. But any member can object to an item on the consent agenda, and then it gets placed for regular consideration. I'm not sure what other municipalities do. I'd love to learn. But that was something I wanted to bring up as, to your point, Councilor Waring, about speeding the meetings along. You know, that's something that as the mayor sets the agenda, if we agree to make it a standard part of the agenda, that would just speed the meeting along by moving a bunch of items to have one vote, as opposed to like in each meeting saying like, let's take A, B, and C together. It would just be together on the consent agenda.
I couldn't agree with you more, council member. I mean, that consent agenda, especially, I'm gonna say for the mundane, for some of the things we already know about, put that at the top of the agenda. And then, and you're right, if somebody wants to pull out an appointment to, I don't know, to the History Commission, and you can say, can we pull that out? And then the other 8 or 9 items go through like that.
Exactly.
Couldn't agree more.
Julia, did you have experience with that in your previous life in Mount Pleasant? Do they do that?
It
Okay.
did. In Mount Pleasant, we had a consent agenda.
Yeah. I believe in that. I agree with you on that.
I would love to have that discussion and find out what our other peer cities and stuff do, just so we can make sure we're leading effectively.
I believe Isle of Palms has a consent agenda as well.
Yeah. Well, I'm in favor of that one.
I agree. I think that's a really great idea. And if we're putting it in here somewhere, in, I guess, section 2-37, I would think it should be behind citizens participation period. That was the other thing I was thinking about, is just it, if you're somebody who wants to physically come to the meeting, I mean, you've got to sit there for, sometimes upwards of an hour, 2 hours before we get to citizen participation, behind all the public hearings, which are their own, obviously, public participation. But if we could get to that any faster and, get people on about their business, I imagine they would appreciate it.
Who decides what they believe will be, no problem? Because I must admit to you, there've been a number of things over the last 7 years. Oh, no, nobody's going to worry about that or be concerned about that. And we end up talking about it for 2 hours.
I have to agree with it.
I mean, I think you can make the language as such that it's, meeting minutes, appointments, and then, anything else that the mayor from time to time may decide. And you can just kind of put it like that. But definitely meeting minutes and appointments are stuff that should just come through in a block, generally. But again,
we'll see what other cities do.
Yeah,
do that. Now, let me ask this: what about third readings? I mean, I don't know if that could be added to the consent agenda. It's not a public hearing, right? On a third, Ms. Cook, is a third reading requires a public hearing?
They typically aren't, but occasionally we do have some public hearings where bills can get a final reading. So if they've already had a first reading, if planning needs to fast track, zoning or rezoning, it may come as a first reading to council and then come back with the planning commission recommendation and a public hearing when it actually gets its final reading. So I think anything that is receiving a public hearing probably wouldn't apply, but
what about something that's already had a first and a second reading?
It wouldn't need a public hearing, but the thing to keep in mind is occasionally things get amended. So when they come back to council on second and third reading, they might be different, and their, council may want an opportunity to discuss the changes.
Okay.
So that would be the only, I think, complication with doing that for third readings.
Or even something like an annexation, for example. I mean, in most cases,
simple that
maybe things like that could be on part of the consent agenda. And if somebody's got a problem with a third reading on an annexation, they can pull it aside.
Yep. Yeah, and I think it's important to preserve that right, that these are things that should be passing unanimous, and if anybody objects, then that's what pulls it off of the consent agenda for regular deliberation.
Correct.
Okay.
Plus the mayor wouldn't have to be jotting his signature down so fast.
I will just add, if y'all are interested in doing a consent agenda, we just started, we just picked some agenda management software. And so they actually have to go in and format all of our agendas for like council and ways and means and the standing committees. It's going to be a pretty big new system. And it's going to take a while to have it implemented. But if we're making any changes to the council agenda or adding a consent agenda, we sort of need to figure that out probably sooner rather than later, so that they can get that going.
Okay.
Okay.
I mean, you think we need to do it for committees? I don't think we need to do it for committees.
No, because I mean, it's generally, you have one, you have just the minutes on the committee agenda, and then it's, kind of regular discussion items and ordinances up for consideration. So I don't think there's enough on a committee agenda necessarily to warrant needing a consent agenda on it.
I agree with that.
But for a 13-page council agenda, it would definitely speed a few items along.
Right.
Okay. Does anyone else have anything for the good of the order before I ask for my favorite motion to adjourn? All right.
Well, can we consent to your favorite item?
Yeah, that's it. Yes, I would ask unanimous consent that we adjourn after having concluded our business.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Without
See y'all
objection,
later.
we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody, and greatly appreciate the input.